Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And our guest today is Dr. Fred Moss. Welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Len. It's really wonderful.
Thank you. I have very high expectations, Fred, because you're supposed to be one of the world's most renowned podcast guests. So I'm just kidding.
That's funny.
I wanted to ask you, I was reading about you. I'm curious, what is non-diagnosing psychiatrist mean? What does that actually entail?
Yeah, sure. And so I've been a psychiatrist for 35 years. And, I graduated from regular university, Northwestern University Medical School. And then I went to the University of Cincinnati residency and got my fellowship. And I was taught how to be a diagnosing psychiatrist. And, that's the standard, is that, in fact, I was taught that psychiatrists were actually, at the time, the only trade in all of mental health that were allowed to diagnose anybody. Like, it's back in the day, and it wasn't so long ago, social workers and even psychologists couldn't make a firm diagnosis. They had to count on a psychiatrist to actually make the diagnosis. So that was one of the things that has been sort of lost to psychiatrists over the years since then. But that's okay, because what I eventually realized was, over time, another job that is really commonly well known for psychiatry. Like, if I ask you or most people, what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist?
Yeah, psychopharmacologist, like you prescribe drugs.
Exactly. And that's the number one answer, as if that's the only answer. That's absolutely the number one answer in everybody's way of thinking. So I began to really, really not like prescribing drugs to people, even though I had been taught to do so. I'd been taught conventionally. I'd had years and years of training. And I have prescribed tens of thousands, if maybe not even more than that, maybe even up to 100,000 medications in my life. But I realized that they weren't really helping people. And in many cases, they were actually perpetuating the symptoms they were marketed to treat, or else causing other problems that were so significant that other medications would then be added in an effort to combat those. Mm-hmm. And this was happening so frequently. And in fact, it seemed like the medications weren't even standing up to their marketing rap. In other words, the antidepressants were not causing the relief of depression, and the antipsychotics were not causing a relief of psychosis. Mm-hmm. And even the anti-anxiety agents weren't causing a relief of anxiety. Instead, it seemed like ultimately these conditions were getting worse, despite the fact that I was and my colleagues were prescribing medicines. So in 2006, I began to do something that was pretty radical, I guess, at the time. It didn't seem so radical. It seemed very obvious. And that was, we have an unwritten contract with our patients. Like, when we start a medication, there's this notion that if it doesn't work, what will we do? Maybe we'll stop it or something. But that isn't really how it goes ever. I mean, really how it goes is we add or we increase or we change medicines. So once you buy into the idea that you're going to be on medicines, once you buy into the idea that that's the final track, that's what we're going to try, then we start medicines, and maybe they do a little bit of good things, and they do a little bit of bad things, and maybe a little more bad things. And then all of a sudden you're on a second medicine. Or, if it doesn't work, all we do is add, increase, or change medicines. And if it does work, we keep you on it. I mean, that's just the two choices. So you don't really have an access to come off of medicine. So in 2006, what I did is I began to take some of my clients, some of my lower risk clients, off of medicine just to see what would happen. Like, really actually take them right off their medicine, let them know that that's what we were going to do. And although there was some weird fear about it, it's funny that people are more afraid to come off of a toxin rather than coming on a toxin. But it is strange. That's the way the human nature is. It seems like people would think, oh, yeah, I don't have to take these laboratory drugs anymore. It'd be kind of great. But no, people get really, really afraid of coming off of medicine, and much more afraid of coming off than coming on. And lo and behold, when I did this, people got better, and in many cases, way, way better. And in fact, their diagnosis would disappear. Sometimes the diagnosis that they thought that they had the whole time would actually disappear when they came off of medicine. This was a really profound finding. Yes, you were going to say?
Well, no, I was gonna just ask, like, are you at this point, are you still diagnosing or you're not diagnosed? They're coming
No, at
to
this
you.
point, I'm still diagnosing. In
Okay.
fact,
Okay.
almost every patient that I see, I have to diagose because I won't get paid if I don't
I
diagnose.
was going to say, is that an insurance
Oh
thing
yeah,
because you have to
for
do an
sure.
ICD-10, CB?
100%.
Okay. Got it. Got
100%.
it. Got it.
If I write no diagnosis in that little
Yeah.
bucket, then I will not get paid for that event.
Clear.
So it's really interesting that, as both of us obviously know, if you go to a barbershop enough times, you get a haircut. And this is also true inside of psychiatry. If you go to psychiatry, you're going to get a diagnosis, and you will be, it'll hang with you the whole ride, like luggage or gum on the bottom of your shoe.
Yeah.
So I began to take people off medicine. Their diagnosis disappeared. I began to really talk about them, I was really kind of upset. I was like, wow, my colleagues need to know that if you take people off medicine, that's what actually gets them better. And I wanted to scream that from the mountaintops, but being violent about it wasn't a very helpful way to communicate. So then I decided, how am I going to do this? Where's the real entryway? Over the next few years, what's the real entry? What's the problem here? Because the problem really can't be medicines. Medicines aren't alive. Medicines don't make decisions. Medicines don't jump up and bite you. What's the story here? What's really going on that people are choosing to put these things in their mouth? And I eventually came up with the idea that people choose to put medicines in their mouth when they think there's something wrong with them. And why do they think there's something wrong with them? Well, they have a diagnosis. And they tell people, my doctor diagnosed me with X, and that's why I take medicine. My doctor diagnosed me with ABC. Usually it is in some alphabet soup form. And that's why I take medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So undiagnosing became the only real smart way to realize how to get out of the cycle. Look, if these medicines are actually causing or increasing or perpetuating the symptoms, inducing the symptoms they're marketed to treat, that's a great business model. Do you have to agree? Like the best
Well,
business.
I always say the pharmaceutical industry has the #1 subscription model in the world. I mean, there's no better way. They'll give you something. Wait a second, you have an adverse event? Don't worry about it. We got something for that too. And you're on the cycle and that's it.
Yeah. And it's not only the adverse event, it's actually the event itself. So sometimes I like to equate the medicines. It'd be great if the medicines worked and gave you an adverse event, but the medicines don't work and give you adverse events. So it's sort of like a Band-Aid with a razor blade embedded in it. It's like a Band-Aid with a razor blade embedded in it will work momentarily. It'll work to cover the cut so it doesn't bleed until the blood extra starts oozing out of the Band-Aid. And then there's only one thing you have to do at that point. If you don't blame the Band-Aid, it's to increase the size of the Band-Aid or to change it to a different kind of Band-Aid. So go ahead. It looks like you're ready to talk.
I don't mean to be interrupting you. I'm just kind of flowing. Did they work for anyone? And the reason why I asked this question, I'm going to preface it. My background, my current business, I have a genetics company. We do DNA testing analysis, so I know there are treatment-resistant depression genes. There's maybe somewhere around 30% of the population has this genotype. Whether it's expressed epigenetically or not, that's a separate, conversation and point. But maybe we have a group of people, and I don't think this happens in medicine anyway, and especially in psychiatry. Nobody swabs anybody and says, you know what, you're in this category right now. It's not going to work for you anyway. We're just going to try it and see if there's some harm is going to come that. But did they work for anyone? And what does work actually mean?
Okay, let's ask those questions in the other direction, because that's exactly what we're talking about here. So look, they do work, in the same way that I have an analogy. But let me finish the undiagnosing first. We'll come back to the analogy in a moment. So once I realized that the only way off of this cycle was for the client to start realizing that maybe there's nothing wrong with them. How would the client start realizing there's nothing wrong with them? Remove their diagnosis. Don't even give them one in the first place. Let them know that we are all humans. We're bumbling and stumbling and tumbling through this world. None of us know what the hell we're doing. That's just the way it is. We pretend we know by acting like the big group of people who are doing a certain number of things that we think if we do, we can be considered normal too. But the truth is that we don't have even a good definition of either normal or abnormal in the world of psychiatric mental health at all. We never have had a good definition. So when we take away these diagnoses, the theory is that if I take away your diagnosis or I remind you that you're okay, then you won't think that there's something wrong with you. And if there's nothing wrong with you, by golly, there's no reason to take medicine. So in the world of undiagnosing, it's the undoctor is undiagnosing, unmedicating, and then in the process, undoctrinating or getting people out of the mental health system in the first place, because frankly, it doesn't work as well as many other ways to rebalance our temporary imbalances in life. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you just said, which is, does it work for anyone? So let's say I have a mosquito bite on my elbow and it's gnarly. It just every day it gets worse. Every day I kind of rub it against the sheets. I can't really reach it. It's like a bummer. And it gets worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, I got to do something with this thing. It's keeping me up at night. It's totally itching. And I go to my friend. I'm like, okay, you know anything about mosquito bites on elbows? And he says, yeah, we got a specialist. He's up in the hills and you got to go see him. You got to go see him directly. You got to call him up, get an appointment. So I call him up and I get an appointment. And you got a cat. It's out. You got a dog. Okay. Yeah.
It's a dog.
Yeah.
That's Hershey.
You got 3 cats here. So I'm serious. And we go to the doctor. We finally get an appointment, go to the doctor. He meets us at the door with his stethoscope and his glasses down on his eyes and his white coat and the whole thing. And he says to us, so what's the problem here? And I said, show him the elbow. And he says, oh my goodness, you have a mosquito bite on your elbow. And I'm a specialist, so you come to the right place. It's really great because I have a 100% cure rate. And you're like, doc, man, this thing has been bugging me for 2 solid weeks. I will do whatever you say. He goes, okay, good. Well, it's only going to hurt for a moment. So yeah, okay, let's do it. He says, okay, we're going to cut off your arm at the shoulder. And you're like, okay, let's do it. And then we cut off the arm at the shoulder. And then we looked at the down where the elbow was. No mosquito bite. He says, come back in 2 weeks. We'll check again. You come back in 2 weeks. He checks for that mosquito bite. There's no mosquito bite. Cure. This is how psychiatric medicines work too. If you stay myopic enough, it'll seem that you're no longer depressed, perhaps, but you're no longer anything. You're fully blunted. You can't even enjoy life. So yes, the crying or the concerns you had when you were sad about whatever you were sad about, it might have been internal or external stressors that you were having trouble metabolizing. You might be, and there are some people, look, I want to make this disclaimer because it's really important that your listeners hear me about this. If you're actually taking a medicine that works and you're pretty sure that your life has gotten better and you wouldn't trade your medicine for any reason, and you're pretty positive this is the godsend that gave you a life that absolutely makes your life work great, by all means, please keep doing it. Of course you should keep doing it. If you've got reaching that point in any area of life, you should keep doing whatever that is. And I really mean that. I'm not arguing with the people who say the medicines actually work for them. What I am speaking to are the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who know that this medicine didn't do them right. And there are hundreds of millions of people who know that this medicine is not what they want to be taking for lots of reasons. And that's the people I'm speaking to. These medicines, again, a Band-Aid with a razor blade in it works.
Yeah.
Same thing.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I think there is part of this placebo effect as well. If you believe that it's working for you and you convince yourself it's working for you, it's working for you. I live in Los Angeles and there is, everybody knows there's a homeless problem. But one of the things that my daughter and I used to do when she was much younger, we used to drive on Sundays, part of this group, and feed the homeless and make meals, and companies would give us, donate meals, and we had Chipotle and pizza place and all that stuff. Some people were very, very grateful. Here's a meal for you. Wonderful. Some of them were extremely abusive and belligerent and, speaking themselves and throwing food back at you. And clearly they have a mental health challenge.
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to I'm undiagnosing them. So it's not clear. Nothing is clear. Yeah. I'm just saying that it seemed to me, being, a novice, it seemed to me that there was something that was not.
It's just that I don't need your handout bullshit. That's all that is. I don't need your handout. Don't give me that. What makes you think you got something from me? You don't even know me. I don't need your handout is a really common answer.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That's put some perspective on it. And the people, walking around the streets talking to themselves.
All they're doing is talking to himself, which is what we're doing too, quietly in our head.
Another good point. So how do you help someone optimize their life without medication? So now they
So here's
have,
the thing:
yeah.
these people in the streets, most of them who are doing this stuff you just described have already been on medicines for years. They may not be taking them now, but the medicines are actually causing or perpetuating or inducing or increasing their symptoms as we speak. And once you've been on these medicines actually do alter the synapses. They actually alter the way the neurotransmitters work. So if you want to be psychotic, if you've never been psychotic before and you want to be psychotic, start taking an antipsychotic and let me know how it goes for a couple of weeks.
Interesting. Do you think that's once going back to what I think I know genetics a little bit, do you think that is the same for everyone, or it's somebody that has like an AKT1 homozygous allele?
Yeah, I'm
predisposition?
all the genetic stuff. I'm certainly no specialist in the world of genetics, but here's what I know: if I take people off antipsychotics, they get better. That's all I know.
Okay, got it.
I know that. I know that if I take people off of antipsychotics and meet them where they are,
Hmm.
actually connect with them with the beauty of a human connection, with the beauty of a resonating, harmonic, communicative conversation that actually captures where they are in life, we both heal at that moment. I do know that. I don't know anything about the genetics and the
Right.
T4/3 allele and all that. I don't know about all that. But I do know that people heal when they're connected to as humans. I've seen this in the prisons, in the jails. I worked at Folsom State, I worked at Pelican Bay, and really the in some ways the gentlest people I ever met are people who are who are there for life because they don't have anything to lose. Now they had at least one bad day in their life for sure, and in many cases they had a few bad days in jail because they were defending themselves or doing whatever they did. And so now they're here for life. But this group is so non-pretentious. And what they want more than anything, including what all 7.8 billion of us want, is to be connected to by another human being. I don't have a more potent medicine than connection, for sure. That is the number one most potent medicine I've ever seen.
So how do you go about connecting? What is the process?
It's in the process is actually, it's a resonating process, right? We humans are vibrations, right? And we first get our vibrations right. So the idea is to find your true voice. And you might see over my shoulder here, I got the Find Your True Voice book.
Yeah.
And that Fred Moss wrote that book. That's of course, so that's me. And how do we find our true voice? We find our true voice by really getting down to the nitty gritty, by moving the things in the way, are moving the things out of the way that are in the way of finding our true voice. And what do? Well, we learned how to be someone that we're not in order to protect the person that we are when we were kids. Like as a first grader, you were no longer allowed to actually say what it is you thought about anything. Was sit down and be quiet, And we learned that the only thing to really do is to mimic the authority. That was how we got through first grade, second grade. It's the best we could do. If we could say exactly what the teacher said, we would pass and get on to the next level. So in this process of learning to be someone that we're not in order to protect the person that we are, we have become naturally very inauthentic and very non-genuine. So what do we have to do is really get to what is sitting down in that core? What is in little Len's core, that's been here his whole life? What is the thing that you haven't said that you should say? What are the things that you truly believe that you don't actually say? In many cases, not only are we not saying things when we know we could or should, but some of us have really reached a point where we actually are saying things that even we don't believe. It's amazing. That's not even a lie. That's beyond a lie. That's like even we actually lie to ourselves and pretend to say what we think, even though we don't even believe what we just said. So we got to clean up a little bit of this so that we start resonating a little clearer, like a tuning fork, wiping off the cobwebs or the mud or the rust off a tuning fork. Mm-hmm. Now, that's our end of the deal with respect to speaking. Now, how do you connect with another person? Is you have to listen. It's all about listening. What's really happening over there? Can you hear what's happening? Can you quiet yourself enough and get yourself out of the way enough to connect with that other person such that they feel heard? Can you get that done? I say the answer is absolutely yes. I've had multiple experiences, certainly, like I said, in the prisons or in nursing homes or in inpatient units, where people haven't been heard for who they were in years. And instead they've been labeled as homeless or sick or mentally ill or forensic or trouble or scary or whatever. And people do not give them the time of day to listen to them for what they are. They've actually already disregarded them upon meeting them. But when you actually get in there and meet with that human being, a true, honest to goodness, divine soul that is sitting inside of each one of our bodies. By the way, this doesn't work with every single person. There are some people I'm not eager to meet because they just stay very afraid and very dangerous at some level. It's like, you don't have no effing handouts for me. There's that.
Yeah.
You can't feed steak to somebody who's entirely like, whose whole diet has been tacos their whole life. There's something like really getting, that there's a time and place for this. But I will say this. Some of the people that people think are incurable cure fairly instantly and spontaneously upon being connected with. And it's so much more powerful than any medication that I've ever seen. And by the way, it has nothing to do with genetics. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I definitely can see that in my experience in life. What kind of childhood did you have? Where did you grow up?
Yeah. I grew up in Northwest Detroit, and I was born to a family in a fair amount of chaos and disarray. I had two brothers older than me. One was 10, one was 14 older than me. And then I had my two parents. So I had like 4 parental figures. And I remember really watching them communicate with each other. Sometimes it was fairly heated. My job upon arrival, is what I've been told, was to bring joy and love and fun to a family that was in this chaos. And I apparently did a pretty good job for about a year or two. I mean, don't ask my brothers now if I've continued to do a good job. Please don't do that, because I don't think they agree that it's been continuous, and probably rightly so. But I remember actually sitting down in my playpen. I had a playpen in the middle of the living room. I totally have vivid memories of that, kind of sitting down and watching and seeing my brothers and my parents actually speak to each other, and then stuff get done, and me thinking maybe one day when I'm a big boy, I'll be able to communicate as well. I became very enchanted with the idea of communication. Then my sister was born when I was 2.5, and I became the translator for my sister. People couldn't understand my sister, but I could. I could actually understand. And I was the one who would tell my dad and mom what it is my sister was trying to ask for. Now, my sister wasn't, my sister's same way as my brothers, by the way. It's not like she would agree that I've been her savior or translator most of my life. It's not been the case. We've had our hard times for sure. But I, grew up, and I was really precocious. By the time I was 5 years old, going into school, I knew a little bit about math. I certainly knew how to read. I knew how to write a little bit. I knew a little bit about sex, and I knew a little bit about drugs. I knew a little bit about Vietnam. I knew a little bit about Kennedy. I knew some things. And so when I arrived in kindergarten, I was by far, it seemed anyways, the smartest, or certainly one of the smartest kids, smartest, whatever that means, the book smart of anyone in my class. And so my elementary school was speckled with a bunch of report cards that were like S plus, S plus, S plus, S plus, U. And U would be unsatisfactory and like self-control and habits. I was a class clown. I always made everybody laugh. That's how and I listened to rules like half the time, and generally didn't listen to rules the other half. But I was accelerated. So the time I was in first grade, I was already in like the 6th grade reading group. And what I really wanted to do more than anything, really, I mean, tears well up, is I continue to do this because here I am, I don't know, 60 years later, literally, and I still have the same goal, which is to learn how to communicate. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to communicate effectively, have open discourse, share my thoughts and feelings with other people. And it wasn't happening in school. So I figured, okay, junior high, that's where it'll happen. I know that's where the big kids go. That somewhere they had to learn this stuff. So I went to junior high, and it was worse. It was actually. So I thought, okay, well, there's still high school. That's got to be where it is. So I went to high school, and it got worse again. I was like, what the hell? This school just gets worse. I mean, they don't have it. And so I really didn't like school, but I really liked being out of school. So I skipped a lot of school, and I was outside in the streets a lot, riding my bike a lot. I like, marijuana was a big deal back then. So I enjoyed smoking marijuana quite a bit. And, I just kind of hung out, and most of my communication was outside of school. Then, because I liked their helmets a lot, and they were only 40 miles away, I went to the University of Michigan. And, so I went there for like a year and a half, and it was good in math, as I told you. And So I got an engineering school, but I literally didn't even know what an engineer was. I
You
went
know,
into
but Fred, let me rewind for a second. Like when you're a kid and you're seeking this communication and connection,
Yeah.
was there a vocation that was associated with that? Did you have something in mind, like,
Mhm.
I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, or not, or
Yeah.
just
Well, it's funny that you asked. By the time I was, let's see, by the time I was 8, my brother was a psychiatrist. So my brother had gone into the talking field. And so there was this idea that all I really wanted to do was communicate. I liked creating as well. I was a fairly good piano player. So I liked playing the piano. I just liked communicating. And I was a musician. So, we had a little band we had a little band. So that was kind of fun. And really, I didn't care about a vocation at the time. It was just like, I want to meet people. I want to have conversations. I want to know people. I don't give a hoot about like how I'm going to make money or something like that. But by the time I was done with high school and went to Michigan, as an engineer, my hope was it seemed like I got to start making money or something. Started having, I worked in a lot of pizzerias and gas stations and stuff going to high school. I loved pizzerias. It was too much fun. But engineering school didn't work for me at Michigan. So I dropped out. I dropped out totally. I was like, I can't do this. There's no communication. I can't do it. So I left and got on a bus and I went all the way to Berkeley to find myself. From Detroit, got on a bus and 3-day trip to Berkeley and spent my time in Berkeley and actually found myself, but it was like, whatever, it's not sustainable. My family called me and they told me that there's this new profession, this new industry that's breaking out that they thought was going to have some promise. And they thought I might be good at it. And they wondered if I would come back to school and try that. And the name of the industry, you might have heard of it. It's called computers. And the only computer in all of Michigan was this 2-acre facility in the middle of Ann Arbor. And that was the computer. And so we would go there at night, I did come back and went to school a second time. And, do punch cards and batch jobs and actually do the whole Fortran and COBOL thing. And it was like, no, this is not my life either. I'll do this for a little while, but this is not my life. So what did I do? I dropped out one more time. And, when I dropped out, I was like, okay, I'm in the streets. This is where I'm going to learn. I'm okay about being homeless, which I actually was for a little while. I'm okay about lots of things. Let me just communicate. Like the coolest people were in the streets for sure. I just wanted to communicate. So eventually my mom's like, I'm like, Mom, we're never going back to school again for any reason. She's like, okay, Fred, no problem, but let's get you a job. I'm like, Mom, get a job, whatever. Mom's like, get a job. So I'm like, she got me a job in civil service as a childcare worker at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And these kids were about 7 years younger than me. And my job was to work in the afternoon shift primarily, although I did other shifts. And then, be with these kids, take them on field trips all over Detroit, went to Pontiac Silverdome, went to Tiger Stadium, went to, saw the Pistons a few times, and we went to Greenfield Village. We had a great time. I loved that job. That job was a killer job. And, but the thing I hated about that job was psychiatry. I couldn't stand psychiatry. Psychiatry was just coming into its own at that time. Prozac had not yet been invented, but because Prozac changed psychiatry, Prozac sent psychiatry sideways for sure. And 1987. And psychiatry had not yet been invented, but nevertheless, we would call the psychiatrist when Jimmy and Johnny got in a fight or when Timmy and Tony were up too late. And he'd come down, and interview these kids and for like 3 seconds. And then he'd interview us for like 7 seconds. And then we'd go have to retrieve the kids and then hold them down in the quiet room and pull down their hip sweatpants and jam them full of some nasty injectable antipsychotic cocktail. And if they were in a stupor for 24 hours, then we would call that a success story. By the way, that's still happening everywhere. Everywhere. It's happened every day since then, everywhere. I've worked all over this country. That shit is still happening regularly. Don't fool yourself. People think those places are safe. That's the kind of stuff that's called safety. So those kids would get I'd be like, that is just straight barbaric. I'm not going to do that because I already know what works. I already learned it again. What do I do with these kids in a van when I'm taking them to Greenfield Village? Communicate.
Yes, share a joint.
Just be here. Just be here. No, we weren't doing that, of course.
Kidding.
And there was a lot of communication, and it was really great. And I just wanted to go into psychiatry and bring communication into that field. So I went into psychiatry with the sole purpose of being a communicating psychiatrist. Then, while I was in medical school, Prozac got introduced, and then psychiatry got flipped on its ear. So by the time that I got out of residency, I was typecast to be a diagnosing psychopharmacologist, and I did that for lots and lots of people.
Did you think about maybe psychology as an option, because you get to do talk therapy supposedly in psychology versus psychiatry?
Psychiatry was doing talk therapy when I went into psychiatry. So all psychoanalysts were psychiatrists. All psychotherapists were psychiatry was the ultimate psychotherapy when I went into medical school.
I wanted to ask you about the current generation. I'm just curious if you think the current generation is experiencing more mental health challenges, or is it that they're so much more open and acceptable to talk about mental health challenges? It seems like there's more of a spotlight on it these days.
None of us know what the hell we're doing.
I love that answer.
Let's just get it straight. We didn't know what we were doing when we were pretended we knew what we were doing either. We didn't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing. Why are the youth having any trouble? Because we're all having trouble. Except some of us think we have found a little haven inside of a big group who's willing to say and believe the things that we're willing to say and believe. The truth is, it's always been the worst of times and the best of times. And it's gotten a little worse. And it's gotten a little better. It's a little worse than ever. It's a little better than ever. Both those things are always true. It's always been true. If you look back at Socrates, it was the worst of times when he was living too. And it's gotten worse. And everyone speaks to it's always gotten worse. It has gotten worse at the same time that it's gotten better. So mental health challenges, what does that even mean? It is no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a sick society. Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
And you really start looking at what does that even mean to be mentally healthy and mentally sick? Like to be disturbed with the way shit's going down? You should be disturbed with the way shit's going down. If you're not disturbed, if you're pretending to be steady state inside of this world, if you haven't found true and honest equanimity in this crazy world, that doesn't mean you're sick. That means you're human. Is there things to be afraid of? You bet. Are there things to be sad about? You bet. Are there things to be nervous about? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Is it difficult to socialize? 100%. Are you misunderstood frequently? Absolutely. Do you have a chance of being thrown off the bus and like thrown down a pit? For sure. Is there a chance of the economy crashing? Absolutely. Is there a chance of war? Absolutely. Is there racism? Blatantly. Is there sex trafficking? Absolutely. Is there wars, crazy ass wars going on in the world? Absolutely. Are we subject to being involved in that? Absolutely. If that doesn't disturb you, you're lying. Why is this world difficult for young people? Because they didn't buy into it. This is impossible to negotiate. So there's something, you know what you do with people who are mentally disturbed? You know what you do? You already do know what you do.
Communicate.
You connect with them. You communicate. Yeah, that's exactly right. You just connect with them. You just listen carefully, like another human who actually gets it.
Yeah, but I do understand that. But here, I look at it this way. So I went to school. There was no, I'm 52. There was no cell phones. There's none of that stuff. There was bullying. And I did, by the way, we have so many parallels. I also wanted to communicate. I also was homeless. And a lot of those things that you talked about, I can really relate to that. My parents are immigrants. I'm an immigrant, came over when I was a little kid. But there's this notion of, you go to school, and I hated school too, and I cut school all the time, but there's bullying, right? So you get bullied in school. Even if you're the cool kid, there's somebody that's cool, or somebody wants to bully you. Maybe it's the athletes because you're out with the rockers or whatever it is. I come home, a latchkey kid, take the bus, come home, get a drink, grab my bike, ride over, hang out with my friends. I don't have to deal with any of that until it's the next morning, and I'm in school again. If I go, I deal with it again. Nowadays, it's 24 hours a day. You have a device that is connected to you that you can get that bullying over and over and over. And people can say all kinds of heinous things to you, not to your face. They don't even know who they are. So I do think that there's a level that's going on today that perpetuates those fears. A lot of his fears, lack of control, much more, and exacerbates that much more. And then people are trying to find different identities. So it's this balance of, oh my God, microaggression. I feel microaggression coming on. I'm like, did you ever get punched in the face? That's a real aggression. And somebody said, "Oh my God, I don't like what you're wearing," and you're going to cry for 2 days. There's sensitivity, and then there's on the flip side. So I think the pendulum is kind of swinging both ways. But it's from my perspective where I'm sitting. I don't know if this is really the reality. This is just what I see that's going on. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that it's not limited to children. It's happening to adults. It's happening to grandparents. Happening to us. The level of bullying and 24/7 hit and runs that are going on inside social media, which I assume is what you're talking about, are left and right. When I post something, if it's mildly controversial and someone doesn't like it, I'm like pissed. I'm scared. I'm sad. I'm hurt. And you can call that a microaggression. It's not the same thing as someone punching me in the nose, but it hurts. And there is a level of pain, a level of discord, a level of dysfunction that gets created, a level of imbalance that gets created in those, interactivities, because we are sensitive souls. And we do want to be loved by our team, by our band, by our tribe. We do. It's really important. And it's always been important to be loved by your team. Someone's got to protect you if shit goes down. And that's, we've always wanted to care. Now, as a youth, are they like worse off? Well, all we could ever teach them is what we knew. And then the stimulations have gotten a little bit larger. And so we couldn't teach them all the things that they're actually facing. But to be honest with you, my parents couldn't teach me everything that I was facing at the time either. And I had a couple different things, like we've already referred to. Marijuana was a savior for me. There's others. I let Bruce Springsteen save my life. Dave Letterman saved my life. There's people out there, Michael Jordan saved my life. There's people out there who I really fell in love with as icons, as ideals and role models on how to really live this life. And, I've done a fair amount of reading and a fair amount of learning. I was lucky enough to go to a really great medical school. Chicago was just an incredible city to go to medical school in. I love Chicago. And then coming down to Cincinnati, I've always just been very blessed with the idea. So with the idea of living, and I didn't know that. Usually I was always thinking that life kind of sucked. And it does kind of suck after all. It does. It's not that hard to make a case that life is difficult or that it sucks. But in Cincinnati, when I moved from Chicago to Cincinnati after I got married and we started a family. Both my kids were born in the next few years. And both those kids, by the way, were here this weekend for Father's Day. So it was, on their own accord, they came. It was just, way too freaking tremendous. Like life became worth living this weekend. Like a new level of, wow, things must have gone pretty great to be having this happen this weekend. And that's the way it was. And, things must have been pretty great. My kids came here on their own accord. They don't have to be here. They came here because they could be with their dad and they'd be with each other. We just had a beautiful week, So you start putting things in priority, and then you start realizing that you didn't know anything. And then you especially don't know the stuff that you know. There's stuff out there that you know. That shit is the most dangerous of all of it. If the stuff you're like, no, I know that. That's actually something I know. That stuff is actually the most dangerous, and that's what causes the most polarization. And, polarization is a huge name of the game these days. You notice that, right? There's this side and there's that side. And when people on the other side, like, if you're voting for the wrong person, or you think the wrong thing about the wrong issue, if you think something exists or it doesn't exist, if you, whatever, all that stuff, you can lose your friends. You can lose your family just by saying that stuff out loud. You can lose your family just by saying that. It's like we have reached a point where it is okay to completely disregard somebody who says something that you don't agree with. Now, here's what I have about that. What I really want to say about that in the world of connection and communication is there's a possibility of actually being authentic with the people that absolutely adversely, are diametrically opposed to whatever it is you have to think about something. Like they say something and their content is 100% against what you know to be true. It is possible to respect that person. It is completely possible in the world of authenticity. Have you noticed that if they're talking from their heart and they're saying something you flat out disagree with, you almost can hang with them, like almost tolerate, as long as it's coming authentically. But many people aren't coming authentically. They're coming angrily, or they're coming violently, or they're coming reactively. And that's harder to hang with. So the idea, again, is to create a playground of authenticity. How do you do that? You become authentic. When you're authentic, you create the possibility for even them, I promise, even them, even those guys right over there, those ones who don't know how to be authentic, they too know how to be authentic if served up the right plate of possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that most of the time, but there's still this faction of I've been isolated. I'm the person that doesn't really have that tribe that you're talking about. I have no connection. My only means and sense of connection is online. So I have this online universe, online gaming. I talk to people. I have friends, but they're not real friends. But then all of a sudden, there's an issue that's happening. And I see that there's also those people that are similar to me that also seem to me that they were outliers like
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
but I see this tribe. I'm now going to connect this. Do I really believe what they're saying? No, but they're yelling. And I love the fact that they're yelling. Now it gave me a sense of purpose to connect to this tribe. So I'm walking around and I'm connected to this tribe. I have a tribe. What is this tribe about? I don't know, but we're all yelling in unison. It feels good. And now I want to go communicate with somebody that wants to listen, but I can't communicate because I'm yelling. And there's no, how do you connect with the people that are those people that found that tribe in themselves, whether it's I have no judgment whether it's a false tribe or not, but it's that level of isolated, insulated. And by the way, COVID maybe perpetuated it even more because that's more isolation.
Nice of you to say maybe, yeah.
Well, I'm trying not to diagnose anybody. You made it clear. So I'm trying to, hedge my speech a little bit.
Yeah, COVID, we've not had an impactful event that was more depolarizing than COVID ever.
Yeah.
None of us know of an event that was more polarizing than COVID. And so you start looking at what that really did. It broke up a lot of families. It broke up a lot of friends. It broke up a lot of tribes. It broke up a lot of confidants. It broke up a lot of partnerships. It broke up a lot of things. And all you had to do was believe the opposite about something. And that was all it took in many cases. And, or believe less than, or some version of whatever your belief system was about what was happening. But when you're speaking to what you're speaking to, what you can do, and this is just available, is even though all of your tribe is screaming and therefore not able to communicate as effectively as they would if they would just be like chill the F out, like actually just talk. You can be somebody who does that even in that tribe. You could theoretically be somebody who authentically communicates even in a tribe of screamers in such a way to get your point across. You don't have to scream in order to be that tribe. That's the thing. You think that was the card carrying. You might think that that's exactly what gets you into tribe. That's the entry ticket. But it might be that that's not so much the entry ticket. It's just something you have bought in order to try to be someone you're not, to protect the person that you are. That's what we learned how to do. So when we start washing that away, the mass of men live lives of quiet desperation and go to their graves with their songs still in them. That's Henry David Thoreau.
Yeah.
We start really looking at what that really means. There is nothing more tragic than dying without anyone ever having known you. But if you're going to yell just because that's what your team does, you have unfortunately caved in and become someone that you're not in order to protect the person that you are.
Yeah, it sounds like Global Madness, which is a movie that I want you to talk about a little bit as well. You said something, it's making me think about this whole authenticity. Do you think that people who are trying to find different ways to identify themselves are still seeking that true authentic self, and they're trying to see, maybe if I identify as this person or this thing, whatever it is, or this animal, maybe there's a wall, maybe people won't see who I truly am because I'm afraid to show people who I truly am?
Yeah, I think that people do that. It's an unfortunate thing that we look for the outside to fill the voids that are inside.
Yeah.
We all do that. That's what drugs are. That's what alcohol is. That's what rampant sex or pornography is. That's what all the dopamine bumps in the world. That's what eating too much is. We look for the outside to fill the holes that are inside. And these are really just holes of the eternal. Like the truth is you can fill those holes, but you have to do so from within. And that makes it an inside job. So do I think that people are like wanting to look to fill up the holes of feeling lonely or or putting salve on their core wound by pretending to be someone that they're not? I think that that's very, 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 very common. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like there's something wrong with it. It's essential humanity. But once you can become compassionate with those people and possibly even display how that is no longer necessary, you can make a powerful impact in letting them see and go from a disempowering context of pretending to be someone that they're not to an empowering context of having them realize that if you would just allow yourself to be you and say what's really so in a way that can be heard, and then listen carefully to the other person so you can see where the direction of the conversation is going. It is entirely possible at that moment to actually heal. No kidding. No joke.
Yeah, it's a very powerful statement. So tell me a little bit about the movie project that I have, right? Global Madness, right?
Is what it was called. It's presently on hold.
Okay.
It was a pre-COVID event and it got
Mhm.
stopped COVID, of course. And the idea was that I was going to maybe be the Anthony Bourdain of mental health, and that I could go around the world and
It's very ironic.
yeah.
Anthony Bourdain, didn't he have some challenges?
I don't know
Well,
if
I guess,
I don't know. We don't know that he did. We just know that he's dead.
yeah, good point.
Everything else after that is what people have made up after that. And so we
Good point.
do not know that what his challenges were. We don't even know truly. Ultimately, we're not even positive. I know that there's an understanding of how it all happened and what really happened, but we are unable to interview people who are dead. So we can't really know what Anthony Bourdain's about. But here's the thing. Anthony Bourdain, the idea of seeing how mental health is dealt with, how it's actually how it's divvied out, how it's dealt with, how it's like defined, and then how it's treated, was something that was really interesting to me to see how the culture, because I had already seen that how mental health was dealt with, like in certain parts of the country or in certain particular cities or was a little bit different. But when a little different than each other. But what I really wanted to see was what if you're in Zimbabwe or Rwanda or in Reykjavik or what if you're in Tel Aviv or what if you're in Auckland or in Australia, and I had these places that I was going to visit and speak to the clinicians and speak to the so-called patients or the people who had been deemed mentally ill and find out how do they define mental illness and what happens to somebody who's different in those characters. What happens to someone who's thinking different or acting different? In some cases, they get moved up the ladder when they're sick, when they're what we would call sick. They have like special premonitions or they have like special intuitions or they actually talk about the voices that we all hear anyways. They actually talk about them. And there's different like interventions that are put in place, including making them shaman or including moving them up the ladder. Or in some cases, like in Australia, there's a dude who takes people out surfing and surf therapy for 2 weeks and they lose their mental illness. And there's another place in Rwanda, I think it's called the Orange Picnic Bench. And what they do is there's only like 6 psychiatrists for 5 million people or something. And so they have to do it other ways. And what they do is there's an actual grandmother sitting on the end of these benches. And we've known from time that if you get the nurturance and the listening of a grandmother, you get better. So you send people over to them and they talk to a grandma for a day or two, and then whatever's on their mind is gone. They just get better naturally.
I love that idea. I hope that somebody listens to this and says, "Hey, let me pick up on this and produce this venture." I think it's a wonderful concept and idea.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about connection and communication and this authenticity. If somebody's and I like how you're calling them clients, not patients. I also made a mental note of people that come to see you. But you talk about optimizing their life. Like, what would be a way that you would initially connect with somebody? I'm gonna tell you a little story really quick to give you some perspective on this. So I was at one point in my life, I was diagnosed with ADD without the H, and I was put on medication when I was a teenager. So I understand what you're saying, works or not work. Yes, I could focus, I guess, but there was no sense of self. Like it was just a different person walking around like a zombie that could focus. But I found cannabis to be my medicine for that time being. So fast forward many years later, after I got tired of working in corporate and all that stuff, I was asked to help a couple of people, and I became a coach. And I coached people with ADD, attention deficit disorder, because I thought it was an advantage. To me, it was my superpower. I never thought of it as a disorder. So it's reframing, as you talked about. But then what happened was some people started bringing people that would, pull out their hair and eat it or cut it. I am not equipped and was not equipped for that. So I didn't know how to deal with anybody that. I would say you have to go see a mental health professional. So connecting with somebody on a personal level, yes, I can have that conversation, but somebody that is a little bit deeper withdrawn and is, suicidal, hurting themselves, ripping out. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to connect with a person like that. So, do those types of people that have those, do they come to see you, or how do you connect?
Of course. I'm a psychiatrist, dude. I've seen all the people.
Yeah.
I've worked in all the places that there is hundreds of people like that,
Yeah.
if not thousands. And so, yeah, of course. And so those people are available to be connected with for sure. 100%. And
How did you guys? Yeah.
and when you start looking at like trichotillomania, which you said, or cutters or suicidal, it is not that hard to connect with somebody who's suicidal if you just allow yourself to see. This world is hard. You better have a purpose. You got to wake up every day and find a reason to get your butt out of bed. It is not simple to do that in many situations. If you're getting bullied, if you're getting kicked around, if you can't find food, if your parents don't love you, if you're getting your ass kicked every day one way or another, it is hard to live. It is hard to find a purpose. Being connected with someone who's suicidal is totally available 100% of the time. 100% of the time. It is not a mental illness to be suicidal. It is something we actually, if we're honest with ourselves, we all go through at varying levels. We prevent ourselves because we're so totally terrified of death. So we're like, I'm suicidal, but I'm way more afraid of death, and so I'm not doing it. But I don't know why I'm living, but I'm not going to die because I'm so totally irrationally afraid of this thing called death. So that's one thing. Now, also, what are the cutters? If you ask a cutter what they're doing cutting, it's kind of interesting. They're just trying to get some feeling. They're trying to find some way to actually feel life. And do we all cut? In some ways, we actually do. We don't take out a razor blade and cut our wrist, but we do stupid shit, and we call that living. And we do stuff that actually hurts us, and we call that living. So can we relate to somebody who's actually cutting themselves in order to feel life? It's possible. As far as like trichotillomania, it's kind of a mild thing. Yeah, who cares if they're pulling their hair out? And really, who cares if they're eating it? I mean, it doesn't really matter. And more than likely, when you start looking at those cases, there's some toxin somewhere, some toxin in what they're taking in their mouth, or what they're taking in their nose, or what they're taking in their ears, or what they're taking in their eyes, or what they're taking in tribally that can be detoxed and can be rehabbed. So more than likely, it's not just if we look at just the end product of somebody pulling out their hair and saying, oh, they're weird, then we'll miss the whole thing. If you can get connected with them and find out what the hell's going on, usually almost 100% of the time, there have been some times where I haven't been entirely successful, you can figure out how it got to be exactly how it got to be, and even have grace and compassion for this person who looks totally strange on the front end because we describe them as strange, homeless, talking to themselves. Yeah. One girl pulling her hair out. Girl cutting her arm. Yeah. So what? I mean, let's connect with that person. You honestly will never, it doesn't matter first of all, if you think that they're too sick to connect with, it's still the most potent medicine out there. And any medicine we give them is only going to make them worse anyway. So why hurry up and do that?
So, I mean, brilliant point. I really love what you just said. It makes total sense. I unfortunately, lost several friends.
That's Stevie Wonder behind you? That's Stevie Wonder. It's
Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, Songs in the Key of Life. Yeah. It's
cool.
one of my favorites.
Oh, and Led Zeppelin 2.
Yeah.
Beautiful, dude. I love it. If I would have known you were Winehouse, Stevie, and Led Zeppelin, we would have had a real conversation.
We're still going to talk about music. I'm going to get to that in a second. I have a lot of I used to be a music buyer for Tower Records way back in the day. And
Tower Records, cool.
Yeah, I'm a big music guy. What are your thoughts on plant medicine?
Great question. I love being asked this question. So I think plant medicine has its place. My concern is as soon as it gets in the grips of the pharmacological industry, it'll get screwed up entirely. So there's guides out there, there's shaman out there, there are ayahuascarians, and who actually get this job done and can do so with the level of sacred respect, whether it's Bufo or whether it's combo or whether it's any of the plant medicines. There's like an opportunity to use these medicines for this ridiculous power that they are, as long as you can pay enough attention to the sacred quality, to the divine quality of what's going on underneath the earth. Also, you've already mentioned cannabis, but cannabis ceremonies in and of themselves can be just as sacred as ayahuasca ceremonies. And, there's like an opportunity to really worship that drug rather than just blowing a belief every so often and really feeling like you've got a spleef, I should say, and really believing that you got it going on just because you get stoned every morning. That's not really the only place to use cannabis. It's quite a hallucinogenic in its own right, quite a psychedelic in its own right. And when done right, the power, with the help of integration and with the help of skilled list, again, what's the power inside of these things? It's in the listening on the way out, for sure. It's in the listening of yourself and the listening of others on the way out.
Yeah. I mean, what a brilliant statement, because it's the reintegration. You talked about synapses and the, neuroplasticity is an interesting concept, but when you are, when you're doing psilocybin, let's just saying, but you have this experience, well, without reintegration, without somebody that's guiding you, what does it mean, and how do you know what happened, and how do you know you're not going to come back? It's there is this connection, and you're absolutely right. Pharma, even with cannabis, I mean, they said, man, THC, great, we're going to synthesize it, we're going to make Marinol, we're going to give you this pill, and great, and it didn't work. But it numbed people, and that's what a lot of these pharmaceuticals, they numb, but they don't deal. It's a whole different experience when you're having this psychedelic journey. Even I had an experience with DMT, a couple of them experiences, and it was extremely scary the first time I did that, but it needed to happen. Like, I needed to have this experience. Why? Because it's like, hey, give yourself a little bit of a shake it up, and let's move on to the next step in your journey. So I really appreciate what you said. It makes total sense, and I want really people to resonate with that, because cannabis, as you mentioned as well.
Yeah, and there's a couple medicines that are made in the laboratory that I think are pretty spectacular as well. Of course, LSD and ketamine are medicines that are just amazing. Ketamine is sheerly outstanding drug. Like the power of ketamine is so outrageous. And again, I don't trust regular conventional, like Spravato is the nasal form of it. Apparently they've got some new delivery system as well that I heard about recently.
There are troches, there's all kinds of ways, but
they're really cool.
Even with ketamine, like it's man, I hate using this word, recreational. People use it just to use it. But
it's the number one most abused drug in London, England right now.
There you go. So I remember way back in the day when I was much younger, there would be the rave scene, and everybody was doing Special K, but we didn't look at it. Was a complete different experience. And if people are using it that way, it's not a therapeutic way to use it. You have to use it correctly and reintegrate, as you mentioned. In your process of or optimizing somebody's life and reconnecting, do you talk to people about, you know, health, like not only is your mental health, like diet, what food do you put in your body,
Yeah.
exercise, like all those different things as well?
Yeah, the Moss method has 20 different things associated with it.
Yeah.
And the 20 different things start off with gratitude in the morning. The second thing is called introduction to morning sky or grounding, where you go outside and actually just take a peek, like just actually get out the porch door before you get too far into your day, and just take a look and listen to the birds and smell the grass or the trees and see the endlessness of the sky and just appreciate it. Then there's meditation. It's really a big part of it. I love meditation. There's nothing more powerful as a resource of getting to what's really at our core self than meditation, and never has been. So that, along with what I said about human connection, are the two strongest things. So meditation is very, very important. And we start looking again, go down a little further. There's yoga and Tai Chi, or all the physical things, as non-combative martial arts that can be very helpful. There's breathing exercises, whether you're doing Wim Hof or you're doing box breathing.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things like organic foods and eating organically primarily, and drinking a lot of water, half your body weight in water, staying away from processed foods and processed sugars, and taking cold showers tends to be really very helpful as well. A cold shower or a cold plunge every day can be very helpful. And then, there's doing service, there's doing creativity, art, music. That's my other book here, right there, Creative Aid, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. So doing creativity, there's spirituality, there's being of service, there's, sleep hygiene, there's taking nature walks, there's having pets. Those things are all really powerful things that get us really grounded. So it's no such thing as just mental health at all.
When you decide to write your very first book, did you in your first book, did you write about your method, like the Moss method, or did that come later on?
The Creative 8 was my first book, and
okay, the Creative 8.
And that was kind of written on the fly. I had a little bit of a method in there. The idea was that if you're so the Moth method itself is more something that's mostly this year. Those 20 things I just said, just a list of the shit that actually works. That's all. And the Creative 8 was a matter of looking at art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, and gardening as the top 8, and realizing that if you would do those things every day, at least do 3 of them for 1 minute a day, you could activate your creativity. And in that process, whatever you thought was wrong with you actually goes away.
I love it. That's great. All right, so let me switch gears a little bit and ask you a few questions. We'll ask about music as well, but I'm curious. Do you remember your very first experience with cannabis?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was that like?
Well, I'd actually done mescaline before I had done cannabis, so that was pretty important. And then I smoked cannabis the same week, but I had done a whole, and what's now called San Pedro, but it was some version of orange mescaline, some microdot, and or like an orange microdot mescaline.
We call the
orange
yellow
sunshine. Orange
yes.
sunshine is what it was called. And I did some of that. I put that under my tongue one day, and life was pretty rough, and I just needed a break. And it's like what you just described with, like what you did with DMT, and it was like, it's just time. And I had such a beautiful ride with that orange sunshine. And then later on in school, my buddy he has been smoking weed already. He was like someone I emulated. Now that I was like inundated, now that I was like, initiated. So I think I was 13. I was 13 at the time. Then I could actually start smoking weed. And so I went out into the fields and at school. And I remember the first time I didn't get that high, but I liked the taste and I liked the social aspect of it. And by the second time I got high. And then soon after that, I was smoking weed every single day for a long time. I smoked weed every day for a long time in high school. And so a lot of concerts. I just went to a Pink Floyd tribute concert this weekend with my kids. And, they did like note for note, Dark Side of the Moon. They did The Wall. It was just so terrific. And so I got reminded of those days, and it was a savior for me. There was like I'd walk around that high school, no longer communicating. Like, I told you, wanted to communicate, but this time I walk around with a big ass smile. I just had a huge smile every single day, like a painful smile in my face, and so I smoked a lot of weed through high school and a lot of weed at the start of Michigan too. And eventually I decided, I guess, to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But and smoke some here and there since then. I don't smoke it every day anymore.
Yeah.
I guess I've found
But
some.
You mentioned concerts. Do you remember the very first concert you attended?
Oh yeah.
What was it?
That's what called Passion Play.
What is it?
That's what called Passion Play.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And the last one
after Aqualung. It was after Aqualung and before
Yeah.
Thick. Yeah.
And then the last one was the Pink Floyd tribute.
Last one was the Pink Floyd tribute. But however, I'm going to Grateful Dead next week in Las Vegas.
Oh, you're doing the Sphere. Yeah.
And then 2 weeks after that, I'm seeing the Stones up in Santa Clara for the sixth time, I think.
Yeah, I'm seeing the Stones too, and I'm going to see the Eagles at the Sphere.
The Eagles, the tickets just went out today.
Yeah, just got them.
$700
Music.
bucks, though, dude.
What's that?
$750. I was like, I saw him today. I actually shopped for him right before this show, and for $750. I'm like, that's a lot of money, man.
I paid a lot of money for the Stones tickets, but last time they came around in SoFi, I could reach out and touch Mick Jagger. I can't believe at 80 years old, this guy, like, amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So music question again, for the next year, you could listen to only 5 albums. Now, you don't have to remember the name of the album. You can say a Rolling Stones album. It's fine. But what will be those 5 albums?
That's a great question. I've never been asked this question. I don't know. I listened to Abbey Road once, like for about 5 years straight. It seemed I listened to that one pretty hard. Okay. So Abbey Road shows up in this conversation. Some Zeppelin shows up, I believe, either House of the Holy or 4, maybe 2. Zeppelin's is the best band that's ever existed.
100% agreed.
Like straight up, it's just the best band that's ever existed. It's period. I don't give a shit what it. I get in the argument too about all the groups, like who's the best, and then I listen to like one Zepp song. I'm like, oh, I forgot. They're so the best. So they would have to be there at least one of their albums, and then I think I'd have to throw in some Bach somewhere. I'd have to like be classical. I'd have to have something to wash me down a little bit, and some Bach or some Beethoven or Mozart, Chopin. Like Schumann. It's like I'd have to Vivaldi. I'd have to pay attention to one of those guys, or maybe some like greatest hits from back in the classical days, something like that. Same thing I said about Abbey Road, I could say about Dark Side of the Moon. So it's hard not to pick it Dark Side of the Moon, but in the same way I could have picked Sgt. Pepper, I could pick The Wall. It's the same thing. I could pick the White Album. I could pick Animals. Same thing I said about Zeppelin. Thanks for letting me just choose the band. And then if we had a 5th one, I think it would be I think I would drop in some reggae, maybe like a Jimmy Cliff or Harley Come or something, or maybe the Wailers. It's hard to knock really great Bob Marley stuff. That's just it's creamy.
Love it. Love the list. Okay, so final bonus question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
How old was I?
You choose the room that you want to describe.
All right. So the room that's growing up when I'm in high school, which is the room in the second house after my 13th year, but tough year. I had 4 posters. I can't remember everyone who was on oh yeah, Lem Barney, who was like a safety for the Lions, and Larry Zonka, who was the running back for the Dolphins, and Jimi Hendrix, who was Jimi Hendrix, and Led Zeppelin were the 4 posters on 4 different walls. And I had an orange bedspread, had a little like like what are they, like pinstripes sort of on it. And I had a record player in there, and every single morning I would play records for my sister and I. She was in a room across the hall, and so that's where we got, our first three records were Abbey Road and Peter, Paul and Mary and Carole King Tapestry, which that could have made this list too, by the way. And Dave Matthews could have. There's a lot of honorable mentions.
Yeah, of course.
James Taylor, he could have been there. A lot of good ones.
Yeah, I asked this question because somebody put me on the spot.
Winehouse. I mean, that's good shit.
But this is the thing. It's a moment in time, right? Because I said to the person that asked me this one time something similar, and I said, it's a moment in time. You're getting me off the top. I'm going to give you tomorrow. It could be 5 different albums. It doesn't matter, but usually Zeppelin, a Beatles album that usually makes the list, and then maybe Stevie and something else.
Yeah, that Songs in the Key of Life. I can't believe I bypassed that. That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous piece of work for sure.
Fred, thank you so much for being on. Where can people engage with you? Where can people get your books and anything else?
The best place to find me is at the central website, which is called drfred360.com. And you can find out, you get all my podcasts, get a bunch of freebies. You can get a bunch of PDFs to my books, and even access to my Audible book on the Creative 8. And see what I'm up to there. And then there's the main website, which is welcometohumanity.net. That's where you got most of your information. And that's a cool website. It's always in progress. And to tell you the truth, I have a coach, and we're talking about killing my darlings, like as a way of cleaning this act up, like kill the darlings thing. And I'm going to make it very clear right now that I'm about to end my time on Facebook. I'm done with that shit, man. I can't do it. I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's painful and it hurts me, and I spend too much time there, and there's no value. And I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I like LinkedIn. That's a good place to be. And I don't have another entertaining website, but that's just as well, because I got lots of really good books to read. So you can find me at those 2 websites or at LinkedIn.
Great. Well, thank you. And as you did not disappoint, one of the best guests I ever had. I really appreciate it. And my audience, you listened all the way through here. So if you did and you like what you heard, please leave a 5-star review. Leave your reviews. I'll read them on during the podcast. I really appreciate everything. And if you want to get my book, it's Making Cannabis Personal on Amazon, wherever you get books. Once again, Fred, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Len.